Well, I'll let me run through a couple of slides, but I appreciate everybody being here today. So we are going to be talking to Adrian Wright and Andrew Pekalis, and I'll introduce them here in just a second. And we are going to talk about their journey individually and then what they've done to co-found the Collaboratory of Virginia and build this wonderful nonprofit community collaboration in the Richmond community. So before I introduce them, let me guide you through just a couple of slides. So I know many of you are with Creative Marketing Group here and also know Creative Marketing Group, but this is the most recent picture of us. Jackie, this is taken, Jackie's probably like, this is not the edited version, but I snagged it last night. We just recently had a team photo taken of all of us together. So great little photo of all of us. And it's funny because when we had Coffee Connections every month pre-COVID, we'd have to get a new picture almost every single Coffee Connection because the team kept growing. So this is just a little bit about us. If you haven't been to a Coffee Connections event before, we had them every month at Elwood Thompson pre-COVID, the third Wednesday of every month from 8 to 9:30. And we were just beginning to say when we all first hopped on how early it is to get up and have coffee and get in front of a computer at 8 a.m. But pre-COVID, we would have 75 people in a room, and most people showed up early at 7:45, which meant they probably left their house at 7:15, and it was a room jam-packed. So we first started having them at the Capital One Cafe over in Carytown, which is the photo to the right. And obviously we outgrew that space very quickly. And then you can see a sample photo from Elwood Thompson back in the day over to the left. But I can't remember what number this is because I lost track over COVID, but I think this is around the 13th or 14th Coffee Connection event that we've had over the last couple years. And they've just been really awesome. And we've interviewed just a lot of spectacular people over the years. So we will be having an event that I'll tell you about next month, and you're gonna keep it going, COVID or non-COVID. So I would like for, if you're able to, this is probably easier for you to do if you're on a computer. I know everybody's had a chance to introduce themselves, which I know takes a little bit of time, and I figured this group was not too large this morning for us to be able to go around and verbally introduce ourselves, which is awesome. That was, even with 75 people, we would take the time to do that at Elwood Thompson because the connection part is really important. So I'd love for you to take the opportunity to type into the chat feature your name, company, email, website, why you attended. I run a lot of different events these days. I'm on the board of NABO, and I always tell people, even during COVID, it's just really, really important to continue networking, even if we have to do it in this environment. So I hope that sharing contact, if you're willing, contact information, and hopes that you can connect after this with different people on this call that you think would be valuable, a valuable connection for you in the future. So take a moment to do that if you would. And I had mentioned this, and Jackie mentioned this earlier, but I'd really like to thank Jackie. Jackie is our main sponsor of our events. Back in the day when we'd have presenters, I would ask them for their headshot and bio, et cetera, and they'd say, well, I don't really have a photo I like, or I haven't had a new headshot in a while. And I said, Jackie, help me out, girl. And so she takes photos, the headshots of all of our presenters primarily, and has been doing so for about the last 6 of them, which is the photo that you saw earlier. So thank you for your support and all you do, Jackie. And just a couple housekeeping items. Stay on mute if you can, if you're not talking, but if you want to make a comment, we'll have a Q&A section as well. And please use the chat feature just to make a comment, just a fun comment. If you have a question, Margaret, who you met earlier, is going to try to help capture some of those questions today, so that when we get to Q&A, you haven't forgotten the question that you wanted to ask. And then use the reactions. If you haven't ever used the reactions, it's at the bottom of your Zoom, where you can use an applaud or a thumbs up, and that's kind of always fun to interact when we're sort of on this interesting virtual tool. And then use video if you're able, so that we can get to know you and see who you are. Okay, with no further ado, let me give you sort of an overview of today's presentation. So Adrian Wright, if you would raise your hand or kind of wave to us. Okay, there's Adrian. Normally in person, we'd all be sitting at the front on stools, so you would know absolutely who the presenters were. But Adrian Wright is the CEO and president of U-Turn, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and also the co-founder of the Collaboratory of Virginia. Andrew, if you would wave to us, hey Andrew, is the Vice President of Development of SL Nussbaum Realty Company, and also the co-founder of the Collaboratory of Virginia. So the mission of CVA, or the Collaboratory of Virginia, is to create a place of coalitions and communities for nonprofits. And Adrian and Andrew's session today, they will talk about their journey, explain how their unique dynamic has broadened their networks and opened many doors. They are going to discuss how their collaboration enabled the creation of the Collaboratory of Virginia, and hope to inspire more innovation in the RVA community. So this is just a little snapshot of the front of their homepage of their website. And so the URL is c-va.org. And we'll come back to the rest of that. So I'm going to stop sharing at this time and pull it over. Give me just a second. Okay. So welcome everyone officially, and thank you Adrian and Andrew for being here this morning. We really appreciate it. So Adrian, you know that I'm going to start with you this morning. We're going to learn a little bit about you. And we're recording this, so you'll get to be able to hear your story back, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. So thank you. So Adrian, where are you from? Where were you born? Sort of where were you raised? Give us some details of the young Adrian.
Yeah, I grew up in Northern Virginia, guys. Arlington, Alexandria. I was born in Maryland. And I've been in Richmond since college, so a little over 18 years. And I try my best to say I'm a Richmonder, but folks who are like second generation Richmond will not give me that title. They're like, you're not from here. So I still have to claim that I'm from Northern Virginia. But yeah, I was raised there. My dad was in the military. My mom has always been in education, and my parents have since retired and still living in the Fredericksburg area, Stafford area, which is slowly becoming part of Northern Virginia. I would say some people already consider it part of Northern Virginia. For years, I thought I was going to move back, but Richmond's now home. So I love it here.
Awesome. I feel like that's a lot of people's stories. So thank you. Well, what did you think you wanted to do when you were a child? What were you going to be when you grew up?
Oh gosh, you guys, I wasn't quite prepared for this question, Natalie, but I think
I did send it to you yesterday. It wasn't late.
Mine is a little bit loaded. If you guys are familiar with like birds of a feather, there's 4 different types of birds, and I am a peacock. So there are lots of things that peacocks like to do that I thought I was going to do when I was growing up. So I played sports for most of my life. So since I was 4, all the way through college, and I played rugby in college. And for a long time, I thought I was going to be a professional athlete. I was all state track and field, and was a starter on my basketball team as a freshman and the highest score. So I thought either I was going to be a professional basketball player, or I was going to be in the Olympics. I mean, I had some big aspirations, you guys. And then once I realized when I was going to college that people were warming up to my PR in high school, I was like, all right, I got to do something else. And I thought I was going to be an actress for a while. And then, when I was approaching graduation, I graduated from DCU. I remember seeing a couple of folks in Richmond who just had these dynamic stories. And Richmond was a really like small city compared to DC, right? And so I was like, there's not a whole lot going on here, but it has this potential of being more than what it is. And this was in the early 2000s. And so I remember as I was getting ready to graduate, I said, I don't know what I want to do, but if I stay here in Richmond, I want to have some kind of impact. And I had no idea what that was going to look like, but I was like, I know I want to be a big fish in this small pond of Richmond. And so I feel like that's come a little bit full circle, hopefully. Humbly, I say that. But yeah, I would say that that's what I landed on as I was approaching my career life.
Well, I think that's a good message, though. I think there's a lot of people that can resonate with, they don't know exactly what they want to do, but they can envision who they want to be or the kind of person they want to be or how they want to impact the world. So I think that's awesome. I think that's an inspiring message.
Yeah, I'll share this too, because some people were probably like, you didn't know what you wanted to do? What were you majoring in college? Well, my education and background is in psychology. So I did think I was going to be a therapist when I graduated. And I thought, like, that's the impact I'll have on the world. Didn't go that route, but.
Well, that was one of my next questions. Where'd you go to school at?
DCU, and
Okay.
my education is in psychology. And instead of becoming a therapist and continuing my education in psychology, I went into finance. And that it was the job that I could find after graduation. And so I started out as a junior recruiter at a finance firm. And then after 5.5 years, moved up to chief recruiting officer of that firm. So I also thought I was going to do that for a while. And then I guess, Natalie, I can go right into kind of like my career history.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So after, and that was at Northwestern Mutual, if any of you guys are familiar with that firm. And so I was chief recruiting officer right before I got recruited to Capital One and did my stint at Capital One. And so I came on as a senior recruiter, managing a team during an acquisition with HSBC. Spent a couple of years there, thought I knew it all, and was like, you know what, I'm going to open up my own boutique for recruiting and operations for nonprofits and faith-based organizations. And so I did that and was way over my head and didn't quite know the business side of things, and landed a large client in Northern Virginia. And it was 70% of my business. And I was traveling to Bethesda 4 days a week. And if any of you guys are familiar with Bethesda, it's nuts if you're traveling from Richmond to Bethesda every day. There was a couple of nights where I was staying up there and I was like, I just know that I don't want to move back to Northern Virginia. And so a smaller consulting firm, Single Stone Consulting, approached me and said, would you be interested in dissolving your business and joining us? And I did. And that is right around the time that I joined the U-Turn board. And when we were transitioning an executive director out of the CEO role at U-Turn, our board came to me and said, well, would you operate in that position temporarily as we recruit another CEO? And I said, totally, I'll do it. And I'll recruit the next CEO. And it was like 4 months into it, they were like, you want to do this, don't you? And I was like, I don't know if I want to leave consulting and do nonprofit. But I did. And it's been a blessing since then. So I've been the CEO of U-Turn since January of 2017.
And so tell us a little bit about what U-Turn does.
So
just for
historically,
clarification.
Yeah, historically. So we've been around for almost 30 years. And historically, we have done youth development through the vehicle sports. So most people know U-Turn for our elite sports programs. We sent a couple of volleyball folks to the Olympics from out of our programs. We have a couple of basketball stars that went to the NBA from U-Turn programs. I know, it's nuts when I think about it. And we still have professional athletes. Most of our trainers have been previous professional athletes in the past. And so that's historically what we've done. In the last 10 years, we have decided to expand our business into, helping more of the community outside of just sports. We operate out of a 160,000 square foot building that used to be the old Circuit City corporate building. And so we knew we needed to utilize this entire building. The first floor was renovated as a sports complex. with 4 professional basketball courts, turf fields, and multi-purpose courts. But we said, hey, we need to utilize this entire building. So nonprofits started approaching us and saying, hey, would you guys be open to having us operate out of the space? And we were like, yeah. To fast forward, and we'll get into this in a little bit with Andrew and I's story, but we now are kind of more of a robust community center offering programs for the whole family. Sports will always be our foundation, right? They'll always be what we're known for, and we'll always do that. But we are now incorporating more programming for other members of the family who are not interested in sports. So arts programs, creative arts, the liberal arts, and offering other ways to stay fit and exercise. So I always give this because in the last couple of months, we initiated Double Dutch, which some of you guys probably are familiar with. And it was the program that filled up the fastest. So it just warmed my heart that people were like, yes, that's what I want to do during COVID is Double Dutch. And you can do it kind of safely and social distance. So that's the direction that we're now going into, is being more of a community center and serving the entire family in the Richmond region.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that's our pause for you, because the rest of it gets into the collaboration of you and Andrew, right? So, okay, Andrew, now I get to pick on you.
Right.
So I failed to tell this story about how I got to know the both of them and how we got involved with the Collaboratory and all of this. And it's just so fascinating. I wish, Andrew, I had taken a picture the day that we met, because it was really awesome. So if you all have ever been to Encorepreneur, which I know many of you have, it's a monthly free event. Pre-COVID days, about 250 people would show up in person at like 7:30 in the morning, like super early, at a different venue in Richmond. It was just, you would get to go to the War Memorial. It was awesome. They still have a monthly event, and 200 people show up at the same time every month. It's amazing. So I went to the one very early in downtown Ashland at the Ashland Theater. They were just reopening, and I think it was a less of a number just because of capacity. And I loved going because I would see all of our clients and run into about 30 people in an hour that I'd know. And somebody introduced me to Andrew, and Andrew and I got to talking. I didn't know Andrew, and Andrew didn't know me. And we started talking about incubators, and he was giving me all the definitions of co-working spaces and incubators, and I was learning all this stuff. And meanwhile, about 20 people I knew walked by, and he was like, do you just know everybody here? And I was like, I mean, kinda, yeah. I was like, that's why I love coming to these. Well, we stayed in touch, and then I think we had a phone call, and then we met. He was like, you've got to meet Adrian. And the first time I met them in person together, which I'll get into this later, is when we started talking about CVA. But that's how this all started and how I got to know Andrew. So now, Andrew, I'm excited because I don't even know about like your childhood. So we're going to start way, way back. Okay, so where are you from? Where were you born? Where were you raised?
I'm from New York. I was born in Queens and raised on Long Island. I graduated Great Neck North High School in 1986, went to Emory University in Atlanta. And then for 2 years, I worked for the Prudential Insurance Company in New Jersey, and then law school in DC, American University, and had kind of a varied career of entrepreneurship. And actually, I was in the P&C insurance business for a little bit. I see we have our agent. Thank you, Katie. and I started a commercial real estate firm called Acclaim Properties in '85, and ran that until recently joining Nussbaum about 2 years ago.
Okay. Well, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up, when you were a child?
I fully expected I was going to be an attorney because my father was an attorney and his father was an attorney. And when I finally got through the process, I realized I've earned the right not to be an attorney.
Okay, so what kind of attorney was your father?
He still is. He's a trial lawyer in New York. He does mostly medical malpractice cases.
Okay.
And actually, he wanted me to be a doctor because he didn't think there were enough good ones out there.
Oh, that's nice. So your whole family still lives back in New York?
My family's spread out. They're all
Okay.
over Boston, Texas,
Well, that's
Virginia,
cool.
Florida.
Gives you a good reason to travel to a lot of fun places.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of lawyer did you think you were going to be?
In law school, I thought for sure I was going to do environmental law. I wanted to do like toxic tort litigation and that sort of thing. Um, and I had an internship with an administrative law judge at the EPA, and that was going to be my job out of law school. And I don't know if you all remember Newt Gingrich and his sort of contract with America. So they froze all federal hiring, and my job disappeared, and my career path has taken me here ultimately.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, it's this is really important. It's important for a lot of people. It's important for those of us who have had a 20-year career it resonates with us for both of your career journeys, just to think back of like, well, I thought I was going to do this and how did I get here? And life takes us in different directions. And then I think your journeys and your career is important for younger people as they're trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do with their life, and giving themselves a hard time of trying to get themselves or put too much pressure on themselves to figure it out, which you really can't always predict where you're going to end up in 10 or 20 years in your career. So I really appreciate y'all sharing your career journeys. I think that's really important. And obviously just very different than maybe what you thought as a child or getting out of school. So tell us a little bit, Andrew, about SL Nussbaum, what you do for them, what the company does.
Yeah, Nussbaum is a full-service commercial real estate brokerage firm. It's based down in Hampton Roads. It's probably best known for multifamily and retail sectors. The Richmond office has doubled in size in the last 18 months. And so we've got office folks and industrial folks, and I'm on the development side, which means I get to pursue projects that are interesting to me, and I can invest in them myself, and I can bring them to the firm, and they can participate as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Okay, so there's U-Turn from Adrian and SL Nussbaum. How long have you guys known each other? Was it because of this collaboration that you met, or was there something? Have you been friends for 10 years? How did the two of you come together?
Andrew, I'll let you tell that story.
Okay. Because this is really a very LMR story. Hopefully everybody's familiar with Leadership Metro Richmond. Yeah, so I was in the class of 2019, and my background in commercial real estate, I'd owned some office buildings, and I'd started an executive suites business. And one of my classmates, Molly Dean Bittner, who's with the Community Foundation, she asked me if I had considered doing co-working for nonprofits. And I hadn't, and I've served on boards and such, but the more I thought about trying to make it work for nonprofits, quite frankly, the less I thought that it could work, because they're always in high rent buildings and they're very expensive to build out, and that's why they have to charge what they do, and it's often unaffordable for most nonprofits. Well, then a few weeks later, she suggested that I meet with Adrian, and I forget how you guys met, but so I think it was March of 19 in February. And so we met, and Adrian had been looking at fully utilizing the rest of the building, especially the second floor. And so they were sort of, I won't say unintentionally, because I know it was somewhat deliberate, but they were dipping their toes in the co-working waters. They had 11 nonprofits upstairs, and they were, there's no point for each tenant to get their own internet or to get their own copy service, and so those sort of shared services U-Turn was already providing for them. So Adrian wanted to do it more deliberately for them, and so when we talked about how could this work, and how can we work together? I mean, the space is amazing. and space, at least pre-COVID, it was hard to find and expensive, and already owning the building, and being a nonprofit, U-Turn sort of is a unique position to make this work. Imagine 250 nonprofit professionals working upstairs, having access to athletic facilities, event and meeting spaces downstairs, up to 2,000 people, parking centrally located, all that good stuff. So Adrian,
Andrew, I'm showing some of the renderings.
This is the test fit. Yeah, so we stumbled on what we think is the winning formula, which is by forming the Collaboratory Virginia as a nonprofit, and by raising the now 3.8 million is what we're in the process of raising to build all this, by raising it in the form of donations and not having returns on investments that investors are expecting, and U-Turn providing below market rents, allows us to build this and have it sustainable and still pass along lower prices to our members than they would pay for rent anywhere else.
Yeah, and I'll share a little bit of this too. I'll back up just a little bit as we get to kind of explaining a little bit more of our test fit and how U-Turn came to this conclusion that we needed this kind of ecosystem for nonprofits. When I met Andrew, it was right after I had approached Community Foundation about forming a co-working center for nonprofits. And well, there was one afternoon I went and walked our second floor and I saw the 11 nonprofits. I like to say that we were pioneers, right, in co-working. Because we were doing it probably even before Gather was around, and just no one knew about it, right? So we were doing shared services for nonprofits. But as Andrew said, it was intentional, but not intentional to make it a co-working center. So we were just really trying to help nonprofits out and saying, hey, how can we lower your overhead? It wasn't until I was walking the second floor and I was like, what are we gonna do with this second floor? My job is to fully utilize this building from an operational standpoint. And I was like, you know what? This could be a co-working center. This could be an incubator, for nonprofits. And so I decided to take a trip to Austin and visit a couple of operators in Austin, Texas, because they are, when I say saturated, they just have the most amount of nonprofit incubators, co-working space. Like they are also just pioneers in that space for doing this, applying this tech model to nonprofits. So I went to go visit during South by Southwest and got to speak with a lot of operators. And I was like, this model works. We just got to figure out how we're going to do it. And so, of course, the first organization I decided to go to, and it was like, if nonprofits need it in this region, it's going to be Community Foundation. And so that's how I got introduced to Molly through my mentor, Fritz Kling, who has started many nonprofits here in Richmond. And some people know him really, really well. He was like, you got to meet with Community Foundation. I was like, who should I meet with? And he was like, you got to meet with Molly Bittner. I've known her for years. We worked at University of Richmond together. So we met up. And what's ironic, and I think just organic to what Andrew was saying, Molly happened to meet with me at the beginning of 2019 and then was in LMR at that same time with Andrew. And we had conversations, I think, weeks apart from each other with Molly. And she was like, oh, you guys have to do this. Like, there's two different individuals who don't know each other, who are kind of coming to the same conclusion on something that can impact the nonprofit space. So yeah, there's Molly. And she's fantastic. She's just great. And so, yeah, and I had put together kind of and I'm going to give Andrew some credit here. I had put together kind of a busted pro forma on how we were going to make this work for nonprofits, because we knew we had to keep the cost down. It has to be under market. It has to be economical for nonprofits to work in a co-working space. And that's what it has to be. And so even though I knew that U-Turn was in a unique position to be able to offer it because we owned our building debt-free and always have, I knew that we had the space, and that I knew we had the operational model to be able to do it. And so it was a blessing, actually, and we'll get into that a little bit, of Andrew and I connecting, and him coming from the commercial real estate side and also the finance side, and being able to say, like, yeah, let's put our brains together and figure this out for the nonprofits. So anyway, I just thought I'd tell that part as we go into the.
Yeah, I think it's great to get that story from both of your angles. And I think there's a good story behind the name that you gave it, the Collaboratory. And I have to say, I feel so honored to have been a part of that discussion. So when I first met Andrew and Adrian, well, I'd already met Andrew, but first met Adrian, and we all met together, the three of us. And I met with them at Adrian's office at U-Turn. And they were like, "Oh, we're so excited you're here, and we can't wait to tell you about all of this." And so what do you think? What do you think if we gave it, what was the name before? Hold on. What was the name before the Collaboratory? It was just something very
It was
generic.
NPI. It was Nonprofit Incubator.
Right. And I was like, okay, not loving it. And they were like, what do you think about the Collaboratory? And I was like, and from an intellectual property standpoint, does anybody else have the Collaboratory? And they were like, no, we've done our research. And I was like, I love it. I think it's fantastic. And they were like, really? Because we love it too. And it was just so much good energy and so fun. And I think y'all did some research on that. So that's the backstory I know from my version of the Collaboratory. So maybe y'all can tell us a little bit more about why that name is important and how you came to it.
Well, the name, we first heard it from actually Aaron McClung and at Wells Fargo. And it's a term in the scientific community. It's what they were using to get scientists all over the globe to collaborate on the same project. But it hadn't really been copyrighted or used, and it fit perfectly for us because what we realized, the space was sort of where we started our discussion. But when you put that many nonprofits together in a community, you can do a lot more with it. I mean, from learning from each other, from getting better and shared resources, and just raising the bar for everyone. And that sort of became the primary focus. The space is almost ancillary now. And Collaboratory is a perfect fit because collaboration is the goal. And laboratory, we're going to be tinkering with this as we go, just by design.
Yep. Anything you would add, Adrian?
No, Andrew articulated that well. I mean, maybe elaborate a little bit on the laboratory part. We know that we're building this for the nonprofit community, but we also know the nonprofit community, and I'm going to say this kindly, historically, there's been a lot of programs thrown at them, but they're not necessarily surveyed a lot to what do you need in this moment. And so the laboratory piece, and we'll get into this when we talk a little bit about some of the programming that we developed this year. It's for the purpose so that we can pivot really quickly. And when Andrew says we're going to be tinkering with it, not tinkering with it just to tinker with it, but to tinker with it so that we can respond to whatever the need is right now. And nonprofits know this more than any other industry. When you apply for grants, you apply for that at the moment that you have a need. And then 6 months into it, you're like, oh man, the need changed. But we still have to use this grant in this specific way. And so we knew we want to add that laboratory piece so that the nonprofit community understands that at any point we're going to pivot to whatever the community needs, and we're going to pivot in order to support them so that they're supporting the community for whatever the need is in that moment. If that makes sense. So.
Well, I think I'm sure everybody can know the obvious question with 2020 that's coming next. So. Yeah, I had these plans for years. The website was developed late last year, early this year. Everything's coming together. You're about to give tours. You actually had one of the Encorepreneur events at the U-Turn space and gave tours to hundreds of people. When was that? January, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then COVID hit.
And then COVID hit. So I'll share this piece, and I'm sure Andrew's going to dive in to add a little bit more of how COVID affected us. So some of you guys might know, we officially launched in December of 2019. So we had developed our test fit. We were partnering with 1717 Innovation Center. If you guys are familiar with them, Rashida Creedon at that particular time was the executive director of 1717. And so they were a thought partner on this project for months. And so we leveraged the graduation of their accelerator for 5 nonprofits to host a celebration and celebrate them. And celebrate nonprofits being innovative in the space, and then also introduce the community to the Collaboratory of Virginia. And that was December 2019. And so then as we went into January, we were like, all right, we're setting up tours. We're starting our fundraising efforts. Like this space is going to be done in the next, what, Andrew, 8 months to maybe 16 months, right? And then March hit and we were like, man, we got to rethink everything. And I think it was the big elephant in the room of like, do people need to be in a co-working space? So the thought of a co-working space and that many people operating really close to each other suddenly became like, oh my gosh, I don't think this is ever going to come back. And Andrew can probably elaborate a little bit more on, the reasons why co-working is now more important than ever. And as we kind of came out of March and into April and May, we started realizing like, gosh, a lot of businesses are folding and they desperately need to lower their overhead. What does that mean for nonprofits? Like if big corporations are getting rid of, are downsizing and reducing their overhead, and small businesses are doing it, and healthcare companies are doing it, that means nonprofits are just going to be like wiped out. And then also like giving and philanthropy was at question at that time. But I'll let Andrew get into a little bit more of those details of why co-working is so important. But I will focus on the fact that it was right around April, I want to say mid-April, Andrew, that we started thinking, how can we respond? We are the Collaboratory. So we need to collaborate with others, and then we need to figure out how to solve this problem for nonprofits. What are we going to do? And so we always knew that we were going to launch an accelerator program to help nonprofits get from point A to point B in an accelerated period of time. So doing something over the course of a couple of weeks or months, when typically it would take a couple of years, right? That's what acceleration means in the tech world. And so we were going to apply that to nonprofits. So when COVID hit, we put our brains together. We got with SparkMill and we said, we're going to launch the accelerator now. We contacted Community Foundation. They were like, we're going to fund it. We're like, fantastic. We're so glad that you guys are working fast with us. And we developed the program, an accelerator program in record time and launched it. And it was a program to focus on helping nonprofits accelerate through COVID and rethink their operations, their mission and vision, their value system, and what now can they offer the community despite COVID, and then how can they push their organizations through the impact of COVID. And it was a huge success. We were really nervous going into it. And I'm going to be honest, Andrew, probably this is the first time he's going to hear me say this. As we were planning this out with SparkMill, there was a part of me in the back of my mind that was like, failure's a good thing. Failure's a good thing. You learn from failure. Failure is going to be a good thing. Like this is going to bomb, but we're going to learn from it. Like it's going to be fine. And it didn't. We had a huge response from the nonprofit community. Folks wanted to go through it. We graduated 15 nonprofits from the program in 6 weeks. And we're getting ready to launch our second cohort, slotted for this January. And so we have a lot of support for the community too. We were able to get it fully funded for the second cohort. So yeah, but I'll let Andrew talk a little bit more about the reasons why co-working is so important now than ever.
Well, actually, I want to back up 1 second in that even before COVID hit, we had decided that we were going to create a type of membership for virtual members. Even when we were leading with the space, we thought that organizations might just want sort of a lower membership where they can come and access the space periodically, maybe grab an open table, reserve a meeting room, and just be part of the community. And that enabled us to have sort of an unlimited number of nonprofit members. Now all of a sudden, the entire community in the region is potentially part of CVA, and that by itself was very powerful. So now when COVID hit, we realized we needed to pivot. First of all, it was also not the right time to ask for funds for the construction project, but also how do we provide the greatest benefit to nonprofits that are in the middle of this crisis? So we launched that Thrive program to help organizations largely go through COVID, but to do that properly means taking a step back and refocusing on what really is your mission and how can you work with other organizations and drive greater impact. What's being successful and what should you focus on and that sort of stuff. So we lined up, we had 15 organizations, and what was special about it was not only the executive director went through the program, but at least one board member and sometimes up to 5 people in the organization would go through it together. And so it's start like this, and then they'd have breakout sessions for each group. We had 15 mentors, so each organization had kind of a third party to help them and give some advice. So the response was overwhelming, and the feedback was tremendous. And that's why we're doing it again. Although, as you could imagine, just our nature is to evolve and adapt. And so the second cohort is going to have a racial equity and justice theme sort of intermixed through everything. So we're starting with the programming. And then we've created the formal sort of virtual membership, and we've gone live with that. And we've got, 40 some odd organizational members. We also realized, we keep asking ourselves, what more can we do and how can we be help to the nonprofits? There are groups out there that need what's called a fiscal sponsor. And rather than form a full 501c3 themselves, so we're in the process of becoming a fiscal sponsor. I don't know if we can announce this yet, Adrian, but for YNPN, Young Nonprofit Professionals Network. So there'll be several hundred individual members of CBA, all working for different nonprofits. And, we'll handle their accounting and bank and insurance stuff. Yeah. What was the original question?
Well, what's great about both of you is that, I have these questions and you're just answering all of them. So good job.
No, it was great. And Andrew, you were elaborating a little bit more on our Thrive program. But we also were just saying, for folks who are questioning whether co-working is still relevant today, it is. And right. There's a way to do co-working safely. But the reality of it is one of the very few models that's going to sustain organizations, not just nonprofit, but sustain many organizations through the next 18 months to 2 years. So anyway, because
you asked me that, Adrian. Sorry, there have been a number of good articles talking about why co-working is sort of going to be the solution to this economic downturn. Even in the for-profit sector, organizations, they've got to stay nimble. They're going to be cutting leases, and everyone's been working virtually, and some organizations are actually doing it pretty well. And I know a lot of organizations are asking, why do we need to pay rent? We're kind of making this work without it. So if you had, 10 offices before, and what you really need is a space to get together for your meetings occasionally, and maybe 1 or 2 offices, well, that's what you can do in co-working. So, and that applies for nonprofits as well. There's several that we're talking to that are trying to get out of their leases, and they're going to stay virtual, and they're going to become members at CVA, and they'll use office space when they need it. And so we're actually shifting how we're laying out the space, the mix of offices versus meeting spaces. How do we keep everybody safe? And the same challenges everybody has. But this is our way of responding to COVID.
Well, there's 2 things that are important that you all have talked about. Laura and I on my team have had a lot of different conversations with associations, specifically in the Richmond community. And one of the things that everybody's saying is, one in particular is a statewide association, and they said it has given them the ability to expand their network into the Northern Virginia area, which pre-COVID didn't allow them to, because everything had to be done in person. The networking, the relationships. So it sounds like because of COVID, it forced you to shift and expand your network of people in a different way, which we've heard a lot of. And the second thing I'll say on the real estate piece is it is very consistent with what I've heard as well. If you're in an environment that you don't need to collaborate with other people, you just need to be sort of head into your computer and just that's what you do all day long, you may not need space. But if you're in a situation where you need to collaborate with others, then the co-working space is going to be the way that the real estate market goes. In fact, we're looking at our own space for that at Creative Marketing Group, because that's an environment we have to work in with our community as well. So thank you for that. I want to leave enough time for Q&A. So I'm going to ask 2 quick questions. And you've kind of already answered this a little bit, but what does the future look like for CVA? And that may be a hard question to answer because it all depends on the pandemic.
Hard.
Yeah.
No, not for us.
Okay, yay, great. I love it.
Not for us. And we're not saying that in an arrogant way. We're saying that is when we first formed the Collaboratory, and I know Angie's going to jump in and talk a little bit about our vision and where we see Collaboratory Virginia going. But when we first formed the Collaboratory, we knew that introducing co-working to the nonprofit space was a very visionary thing to do. Like there weren't nonprofits doing it. So for us, we've stayed in that cadence, and we keep that head on where we're like, we're gonna introduce some things that maybe you don't see in the market, but we're gonna dare to do it. And when COVID hit, COVID was a blessing in disguise. I mean, it's horrible, you guys, but it also proved that what we were forming for the nonprofit community was actually really necessary. When a tragic thing hit and the nonprofit community needed to scale down and have shared services, we had the model ready for them. And so we are continuing to think that way as we're developing the space. And we're thinking that, as nonprofits are working closer together, there's that opportunity for us to have those peer groups, so there's peer nonprofits in each industry, work closer together and to develop what needs to be innovative in that particular industry. So if you're a nonprofit working in healthcare, if you're a nonprofit working in education, when they're in close proximity with each other and you're networking and you're picking each other's brains, more comes out of collaboration than it does in silos. So anyway, I'll let Andrew expand a little bit more on that, but that's just a part of our vision for Collaboratory Virginia.
Yeah, we have some pretty lofty goals. We would love to get to the point where we can truly provide shared services in the form of having our own staff of professionals handling different aspects for different nonprofits. And then smaller ones or organizations looking to be leaner will utilize very good people on an hourly basis and not have to, worry about their overhead as well. Given the network that we're trying to build and us sort of becoming a hub and a connector for the whole nonprofit community, we want to help fill gaps and avoid duplication of efforts. To bring, if something new develops, the new opioid crisis or whatever, we want to bring the 10 organizations that are on the periphery of that issue and bring them into the room together, maybe with some money from donors, and say, this is a problem. And if we keep it as a vacuum, some new nonprofit's going to form, which is fine, but you all can handle this. And how can you work together to make it happen? Now that's maybe a bit arrogant to think that we'll be the ones, to tell everybody how to do all that. But, over time with the connection, that's what we hope to do.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that it's donor supported, right? So donors want to see this type of effort happen. They want to see the dollars utilized in a more efficient way. And so we're not only helping the executive directors of those nonprofits say, how can we keep you lean and you're focused on your mission and less on the operational side, but your staff is not stretched as thin because they're collaborating with other nonprofit organizations. And then the donor, when they're giving that money, they're like, man, look how effective those dollars were. Now I want to give even more. And so again, what we're hoping is that this is just a positive circle that we're able to create, since nonprofits will be able to work closer together and be in close proximity and build trust and unity with their efforts in supporting the community.
Well, I think that your dedication and drive is admirable. And I think everybody on this call could agree with that. And those I think everything you said, your mentality of everything, it's what you have to have through COVID and beyond, not just to survive it, but really to thrive through it. And so I have no doubt that this is going to be absolutely amazing. So my last question is, how can we, the people on this call, and for those that would listen to this later, how can the community support you, and what can we do to help you grow and be successful? Adrian, it looks like Andrew, you should go first.
Well, there will be opportunities to get connected. This is not the place for a fundraising request. But spread the word. We need to sort of proselytize a bit. And I'm going to ask you all a question. We try to ask everybody this. What more haven't we thought of? As you think about what a network of nonprofits that's more resilient with all the facilities, what more could be done that we haven't thought of yet?
Mm-hmm. And you can throw that in the chat feature. Andrew, so this is the reason why we're a great team, because he's going to say he's going to ask that question. And I'm going to say that when you don't ask, you don't get. So we're in the process of raising $3.8 million for this space. That $3.8 million is going to pay dividends over the next couple of years for the nonprofit ecosystem. And that's just the beginning. So we do have a donate button on our website. So if folks feel compelled to give whatever they feel comfortable, they can totally give that. It doesn't have to be anywhere close to $3.8 million. It could be $15 and we're going to take it, right? Because anything that we in nonprofits in this, that can go towards operational costs, and we appreciate that. But also we ask that you have this conversation with your network to say, this is an opportunity for nonprofits to make it. And to not only survive, but to thrive. So if we can get this space done, this is just the beginning of nonprofits becoming more efficient. And we know that they're already the cornerstone of our community, right? Without nonprofits, if certain nonprofits or many nonprofits go out of business, our community is going to hurt. We're going to see that. We might not see it immediately, but we'll see it over 6 to 18 months. For sure will see that. So we ask that you have conversations with your network about giving to this campaign and supporting the effort of building out Collaboratory.
Have you all done a lot of speaking within, kind of like this, but within the nonprofit communities? And if so, or if not, perhaps that's another opportunity to get connected with the right people to continue to get the word out about what you're doing and what you have to offer for those that don't know.
Yeah, I would say, and Andrew, you might add some comment to this too. I would say that we have a good problem. Every single time we talk about this, there's a handful more of nonprofits that are like, we needed this yesterday. And so we're very glad that nonprofits are resonating with it, and they're saying we need to go into a shared service model, or we want to learn more about bringing our overhead down. And we thought about that for a second, but now that there's something out there that's being offered, we definitely want to get into that type of model. What I would say is where we need a lot of help is continuing to spread this word to donors. So folks who can support the efforts of building out this space for the nonprofit community. So yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Quickly, I saw a question from Jackie, or a comment. That's a great idea if we could add childcare. And Adrian is separately trying to entice a childcare development center to come on site, or at least nearby. And so we're working on that. But I also wanted to spend a second on our onboarding process, because that sort of comes back to you, Natalie. We're again, we want to add value. So any new member can go through a process, among other things, if they're not already affiliated with Creative Marketing Group. CMG will do sort of a marketing audit of their digital presence and give some suggestions. Similarly, we have fundraising and IT and volunteer engagement. We've got lots of experts and mentors that we're sort of grooming for the network that will help all new members in some capacity.
Yeah, yeah, we're really excited about that. We've been doing something similar with Lighthouse Labs as well, and we've been extremely supportive to the folks that are going through that program from a marketing standpoint. So thank you for that plug. That's really helpful. There was another question. So as I was scrolling through your about page and your board and your partners and all of that, so there's lots of comments on Nanette. So can you tell us who Nanette is and what her role is?
You want to take that one, Adrian?
Sure. So Nanette is our fundraising specialist. And so she is helping with that fundraising effort. She's a big fan of the Collaboratory Virginia and has been a part of, we've been having this conversation with Nanette from pretty much the start. And so we were excited for her to join our team and help with those efforts to raise funds.
I think it was Nanette's suggestion that we build an advisory board, which will ultimately lead to a capital campaign committee and that sort of thing. So, so we've been very thrilled with the folks that we've been able to get on the advisory board thus far. And it's a dynamic group, and they've also offered some very helpful suggestions to us.
Well, and I just want to make a special plug because I'm not sure when she has to jump off, but Margaret Taylor, just wave your hand again, just for everybody's, she's so cute. Margaret has been really instrumental in working with CBA. I don't know, for I guess the last 6+ months, and Emily's been very supportive on our team as well. Any questions you have, Margaret, or anything you want to add?
No, it's just been amazing. Every week I come together with Adrian, and then about every month I come together with Andrew and Adrian together, and just listening to their passion and the ways that they're all these behind the scenes conversations and all these things that they're doing. And then we have a conversation and they're like, so we're going to do this. How do we market it? How do we talk about it? How can we build this? And I'm like, all right, let's go. And so their energy and enthusiasm is so just contagious. And so it really is the highlight of my my client relationships, just to work with them and to see all this come to fruition, and being able to offer these brand audits to their members is really exciting. For those who know me, I love giving my opinion. So it's a wonderful place for me to be able to give my opinion and be able to help out with some of these nonprofits and be able to share with them, just ways that they can elevate their own brands. So I absolutely love that this is an offering that we can do with them. But yeah, they're amazing, and everything that they have in the future, I'm really excited to continue to be a part of. So no questions, just a big plug to say I'm just such a huge fan.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, guys. But I do have to jump off.
I know Margaret's juggling kids and a million other things. So Margaret, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you got to chat for a second.
Yeah.
Lene, why don't you, you've already introduced yourself, but do you want to pose your question for us?
Trying to wake up my mouse here. Yeah, so I have to jump off as well. Amanda and I have a client call here at 9:30, but yeah, so I put in the chat, just, wasn't sure, you've probably already thought of this, but tying in U-turn services just for those, physical fitness breaks, yoga classes, some, tying in that gym membership kind of deal. But then you have access to your pro athletes, your coaches, getting them up there. Like that gym teacher, the rah-rah, getting everybody motivated in the middle of the day. I think that'd be a really nice benefit. But again, you've probably thought of that, but just want to throw that out there just in case. But have you tied that in yet?
Well, it definitely is a part of the reason why we think U-Turn was uniquely positioned to be able to help launch the Collaboratory of Virginia, right? And so 100% there's going to be services that are offered on the first floor that members and resident members are going to be able to participate in. But the collaboration and the partnership of U-Turn and now CVA as a separate 501c3 works almost perfectly. So when I went to, I'll just say this quick little tidbit, when I went to go visit a lot of operating centers in Austin, Texas, a lot of them, the feedback was, we have this great co-working space and it's fantastic, but now we're partnering with the building beside us and we're hoping to buy it so that we can put athletic facilities in there, right? And a gym and all these wellness services. And I was like, that's so great. We already have it. And they're like, you're ahead of the game. So 100%, the members are going to be able to benefit from the partnership with U-Turn and being in the U-Turn building.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the U-Turn partnership goes beyond the space. I mean, if nothing else, it's rare for any organization to be willing to loan out their CEO on basically a part-time job basis to help start another nonprofit. The staff at U-Turn is helping CVA practically daily. Insurance and the board approval to allow this to happen, and offering below market rent to make it happen. It really couldn't be done anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, let me say two things real quick. We will send an email out with contact information and information about our November presentation, which will be Maggie Longest from, she's the executive director from the Downtown Ashland Association, and she's got an incredible story as well, and she's doing some amazing things and has had to pivot quite greatly during COVID as well. And I believe we all have the ability to stay on just a little bit longer, but I just really want to put a special plug in for Adrian and Andrew. And thank you so very much for being on today and for sharing your story and impacting others.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you have the ability to stay on for a few more minutes, Lawanda specifically, you had a question, if you'd like to ask it.
You're on mute.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
found the button. I was just wondering, do you place any type of stipulations on the nonprofit organization to participate in your programs? Some opportunities say you have to be in business, so many years, because I know of a lot of startups that would probably benefit. So are there any types of limitations or requirements that you place on the nonprofit?
No, I mean, we have said that we really truly believe this is going to be an ecosystem of many nonprofits at different stages of the nonprofit life cycle. So some legitimate nonprofits need to start because they are going to fill in the gap, as Andrew mentioned. And so they truly are a startup nonprofit. Andrew mentioned that we will operate as a fiscal sponsor for nonprofits who don't need to necessarily get their 501c3, but our requirement is that they have their 501c3 and they can be anywhere in that nonprofit life cycle. So from startup to mature nonprofit that's been around for several years, it just needs to rethink their operational model and maybe come into a shared service model or think about what they offer to the community and how that needs to change and adapt.
Do you provide services for them to rethink their model?
So Thrive is one of those things. The accelerator program, they start with your mission, vision, and values. We start there, and then we go all the way through your operational model and the way that you serve your community. And we even touch a little bit on your staff and the way you operate internally. So 100%. Applications for the Thrive program coming up in January are currently available on our website. So if you are a nonprofit that's thinking about going through that accelerator program in January, we encourage you to do it. It is a commitment once a week for 2 hours, but if you talk to any of our graduating nonprofits, they're like, this was life-changing. Like we needed to do this at that particular time. So we encourage nonprofits to apply for that.
Yeah. Technically, we have 3 requirements for membership. One is that you either be a 501c3 or you've applied for it. 2 is that your mission and your purpose and programs benefit the lives of the people living in the community, and that you adhere to a inclusion and non-discrimination statement that we're still forming. That's kind of our way of keeping things, just have some boundaries, but pretty much everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask a question? There are I could talk for 10 minutes about how excited I am to hear all the things that you're doing and the gaps that you're identifying. Like, it sounds so great. There are hundreds of nonprofits in Richmond. What's your capacity?
You
Yes.
mean within the space?
Either to support just this enormous community of nonprofits in Richmond.
Yeah, we recognize, and Andrew kind of touched on this a little bit, we recognize the fact that the virtual membership and the in-house resident membership or in-house resident offering, they're both are going to be needed. So there's going to be nonprofits. I think our capacity pre-COVID was 256 individuals could be in that space. So depending on how large those nonprofits were that moved in, that was our capacity. But as we learn through COVID, there's going to be lots of nonprofits that are in this kind of hybrid model where they're working from home and they need a space to meet. They need a conference room. They need something to reserve. So that expanded our capacity. And so we know that we're going to be able to invite more nonprofits to be a part of that ecosystem and utilize the space, but maybe not 100% of the time. So that's the benefit and the what's wonderful about co-working space in a shared model.
And on the virtual side, we're really just kind of limited by our budget and technology. You know, there's a lot that we can do for programming. You know, like this. I don't know how many people it takes to put a Zoom call together, and whether you have 30 or 1,000, you know, you can still be effective.
That's enormous capacity. That's great, you guys.
Yeah, and nonprofits that maybe won't even utilize the space can still be in the shared services too. So.
I don't know if we covered this already. Is there a particular target that you're going after versus like a startup nonprofit versus more established nonprofit?
You mean where in the life cycle?
Correct.
We want a mix. The mature established ones can provide some pretty good examples and you know, just real world experience for some of the younger ones, but you know, and even somebody that's in the process of forming one. In fact, if they have an idea for one, this has already happened where they've come and said, you know, this is what I want to do. And we've been able to connect them with other nonprofits in similar space. Sometimes people just don't know what else is out there. And right now, the Connect VA database is kind of the best that you can get. And it's, you know, not necessarily easily searched. And, you know, hopefully we can do better with that.
Yeah, because I do think there's an opportunity. I talked to somebody the other day and they know the nonprofit they want to start. They know the name that they want to do, but logistically they don't know what to do next to formalize it. So I think there's an opportunity there as well for the hundreds that Lynette mentioned that are out there. Then there's the hundreds that are going to start, especially during COVID, because we've seen that a lot with startups. People have gotten furloughed or laid off or whatever, and they've been sitting around for a couple of months saying, I'm not going back to my sales job. I never liked it. I'm not going back. And I've been thinking about things that I'm passionate about, and now I'm going to go in this direction. So I think you're going to have a lot of startup nonprofits that are going to be looking for support as well.
Well, that was also one reason why we changed the name, because incubator implied that we were only helping startups, and it was sort of confusing people.
Yeah.
But I could see us putting some sort of toolkit together and a program ready-made for startups.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Caitlin, I was on a call with you the other day and somebody asked, how do I start an LLC? And that's a big question that people ask. They don't know what to do. They're going to lawyers. Lawyers are charging bukus of money to do something that's really not that complicated. And Caitlin was saying that she's got a little, I guess, sort of package or sort of rundown of what needs to be done to start an LLC, as do we. Maybe that's an opportunity too. Cool. Well, I know a lot of people have to run. Does anybody else have any other questions they'd like to ask before we run today?
Just thanks for sharing. It's been such a great opportunity to learn about more collaboration in Richmond. I love it. I'm excited for you guys. It's awesome.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everybody for waking up early.
well, it's recorded. So for those people that just woke up, they can watch it later. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much. And Adrian and Andrew, thank you again. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And I can't wait to see everybody on another Zoom call, probably this week, and hopefully in person very soon.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.